I am absolutely delighted to be joined by BBC Radio Merseyside presenter Giulia Bould. Now, Julia, there's a bunch of things that I want to talk to you about. But first and foremost, it's great to finally have you on the podcast for a chat. How things?
Yeah, really good. You know, I was looking through all the people you've had on as well, and I thought, oh, I hope I'm not let down.
Yeah. No, a couple of people have said that to me, and it's not like obviously it's good to have high profile guests on, but I think that the root of my interest in speaking to them is obviously to sort of hear about their stories. And I always say that every single podcast that I've done, there's always something that I've learned from it, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah, and I always think maybe people that present or do reporting are probably fine doing what they do, but it's when you're being asked the questions.
I don't know. I guess it could be a really. I think the first place to start. I don't know, as I mentioned, that we could do a full hour on this is the current state of affairs at Everton Football Club.
Yeah.
We can talk about the January transfer window and the appointment of Sean Dyche replacing Frank Lampard. But first and foremost, obviously, what you're covering it, what's your thoughts on the current situation that Everton Football Club find themselves in?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered Everton for nearly 20, for as long as my career, almost, I've been covering Everton. And they've always been a club that, other people have looked to and gone, oh, they do that right. And, they get so many things right. And, it is a big club. And I don't like seeing online when you see people go, well, it's not a big club, really, is it? It is. It's a founder member of the league. It's huge in football's history. I think what I can't believe is that when I was covering them originally, it was David Moyes, and he was there for years. He was there for so long. And then it's been a revolving door at the front of Finch Farm ever since he went, really. And not just with managers, but with players. You and I know that, there were the likes of when Leighton Baines joined, he came from Wigan, obviously, but saw his pretty much all his professional career out, same with Seamus Coleman. And even players now aren't really staying too long. There just feels that there isn't sort of that, I don't know, kind of, there was always a feeling that Everton that it was, for life. And that's probably how fans are feeling right now. And I think it's sad what happened with Frank Lampard. I don't think it was for the want of trying. He was a rookie manager. You're always going to make mistakes, but I don't think he ever shied away from that. I think everyone knew that was the case, but I just think the situation's clearly quite severe now at the club. It's not about a manager because they've tried everyone from, Ronald Koeman, a legend of the game, to Marco Silva, who was a young up and coming manager, and they didn't feel that was correct. And then look at him now with Fulham. Roberto Martinez did pretty well with Belgium, didn't he? He did all right there. Who else has there been? Carlo Ancelotti. It's clearly not the manager, but it feels for anyone covering it. And I was at Finch Farm today, and I was talking to just some of the other media, and it's just sad for everybody really now. I think even Liverpool fans, you go online and actually, yeah, there are some taking the mick, and there always will be, but there's actually a lot of Liverpool fans I think have got a bit of sympathy now.
I think you make a really interesting point there around the revolving door that has been the managerial appointments at Everton, because I think there's certainly a case to be made, and I include Rafael Benitez in this, that every single Everton manager that have been over the last 5, 6 years have a reason to command respect out of virtue of what they've achieved in the game, not just as a manager. Rafael Benitez obviously won the Champions League, achieved a lot with Valencia. Carlo Ancelotti did what he did. Ronald Koeman, as you mentioned. Frank Lampard, as a footballer, in and of itself, his achievements are huge and command respect. But it has almost got to the point now where, as you rightly point out, the fingers aren't necessarily being pointed at managers, because it's almost like a sustainability issue. Everton were the epitome of stability, and it's almost as if their mode of operation in this new commercial world of Premier League football, it just seems to have been outdated. And as you know, at the heart of the protest, that is where all the anger and frustrations are being vented. But just to keep it on the managers at the present moment, you mentioned there Sean Dyche, and reminiscent of around this time last year, Everton have elected to appoint him, replacing Frank Lampard, as you know, they put their trust in him to keep them in the Premier League, which the situation that they're in now in 19th place is seeming like a daunting task in comparison to last season. When I've looked at Dyke, I think his last two jobs at Burnley and at Watford respectively, he's got a rough win percentage of around 35%. So just to put it bluntly, do you think he's the man to keep Everton in the Premier League?
Well, that win percentage is higher than what Lampard had at Everton. So you would assume maybe the right choice has been made. And I'm not slating Frank there at all. Again, I think there was just a lot of other factors. And maybe for somebody who was still, relatively new to a managerial career, I just wonder if Frank, just as an aside, will give up because every club he's been at has had other issues going on. So that'll be interesting to decide if he just decides, you know what, management is not for me. But yeah, Sean Dyche, I think he comes across exactly as he is. I don't think there's any sides to him. I love watching the videos this week of the bleep tests, which seems really old-fashioned, but actually it's old-fashioned and it works. Otherwise, the army wouldn't be doing it and, all that kind of stuff. I think he'll get them very fit very quickly, and they were very fit to start with, but I think he will increase that, and I don't think he will allow anyone to shy away. And yeah, I almost feel, and I don't like to say he's got a free hit because nobody has a free hit. There will still be enormous amounts of pressure, but I think what happened with deadline day just a couple of days ago, the fact that nobody was brought in at the club, what is incredible, and I'm sure you agree, is you just see this massive swell of support now from the fan base that, the sort of talking about the Glazers issue at United. I was just looking at something online and they were saying it's perfectly okay to protest against your club but support your team. And I envisage that is what is going to happen against Arsenal on Saturday. I think Sean Dyche will get a bigger reception than he's anticipating. I know today in his press conference, he sort of urged fans to be behind him. And he doesn't strike me as a sort of person that sits after tea scrolling Twitter. So he probably doesn't realise he's already got that backing. I mean, maybe he does, maybe I've just got him wrong. But I think he will be quite taken aback by what's going to greet him at Goodison. You know what it's like. You see the scenes. It is absolute carnage outside, as that bus arrives and there is blue smoke everywhere and the noise. I don't think he's ever going to have seen anything like that in his life. And yeah, I think with a bit of backing, do you know what? It wouldn't even shock me if he got something out of the Arsenal game, but I think he could do it. I think if he keeps Everton up, it will be probably the greatest achievement of his career.
That is certainly a fair shout, and it'd probably be alongside getting Burnley into the Europa League, which rang a bell in my head when you were talking about the sort of old-fashioned method of the bleed test and whatnot. That season, he got Burnley into the Europa League. Sam Allardyce was Everton manager, if I remember correctly. And
another one we haven't mentioned.
Around the time of his appointment, the negativity and the unrest around the club obviously wasn't to the levels that it is now. But there was that sort of we've appointed Sam Allardyce, but the reason why Everton appointed Sam Allardyce was that pure fact that he was a pragmatist and he has a proven track record of keeping teams in the Premier League, similar to Dyche in that respect. And it's funny to think, if you look at the likes of Carlo Ancelotti, Benitez, Marco Silva, Sam Allardyce finished higher than a lot of them with Everton. So,
yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's so tight still, that table. And I sort of keep saying to people, there's so many games left. It's only just turned February, isn't it? We're only just halfway. So it doesn't, there were so few games last season where it really was, every game was a cup final. I think Sean Dyche will have the mentality that every game's a cup final. And I don't think he will let anybody breathe until there is a gap appearing, maybe between the top, the bottom three and Everton, if he can get them out of it. It's going to be a tough ask. It's going to be a tough ask, but I still have a feeling I don't know. This will get played back, won't it, when I'm completely wrong? But I still have a feeling he could do it. And as you say, because he is so well versed in the Premier League, it might not be the prettiest football anyone has ever seen. And I think Frank Lampard got quite frustrated because it wasn't how he used to play football. It wasn't the style he played with any of the teams he was with, in particular Chelsea. And I think probably that's where he became a bit unstuck. He couldn't play the football he wanted to, the players he had. I think Sean Dyche won't care. He'll do whatever it takes to keep Everton up. And I think, unfortunately, the fans are just going to have to suck it up if Premier League status is to remain.
I'm going to say, I don't think Evertonians will mind either if a bit of 4-4-2 and being hard to beat. I don't think they're about that, you know. We touched briefly on deadline day. Obviously, whilst I think all the other teams in the bottom 8 managed to get someone through the door, there was no activity at Finch Farm in terms of incomings. Now, one of the topics of discussion that I want to try and tie this into is fan activism. Now, there's an opinion doing the rounds on social media when you speak to other Evertonians and whatnot, that the protests, the banners, the unrest, the noise that the fan base are making is somewhat of a deterrent for getting new signings through the door and is ultimately at the detriment of the club. I can almost see both sides of the argument in that respect. And I think fan activism is hugely important to football as a whole. You know, you look at examples on the continent in places like Germany and what that's managed to do in Germany with like the 50+1 rule in terms of ownership and governance. It's vital and it's important to almost, I'm going to go as far as to say, is keep the soul of football working class. But what's your take on that opinion that it's a deterrent almost?
Yeah, I mean, you could. I can see the argument saying it is a deterrent and that players won't want to come and play. Personally, I don't think that's the case. I think players know they will get grief at some stage in their career because that's kind of what goes on. I think if a player really wanted to join Everton right now, it's got such a history. It's such an iconic club. It's a club that everybody knows. You know, you could go into any country right now and, you know, ask a football fan and they'd know something about Everton. I just think, it was a bizarre one, wasn't it? I think it was the only Premier League side not to do any business. I think that was right with Everton throughout the entirety of January. I'm not convinced it's down to fan activism, who, you know, the fan base clearly upset with the ownership and how the club's being run right now. I mean, Liverpool had it, trying to think how many years ago, about 10 years ago or so, with Hicks and Gillette, didn't they? You know, there was, and I think that was another example of getting behind the team, but then protesting before and after games about the ownership and how the club was being run. And it didn't really stop Liverpool being an attractive proposition to players. So I wouldn't think, if a player really wanted to, particularly if they were abroad and they thought, I want to go in the Premier League. I know Conor Cody's spoken about it. A big pull for him was joining Everton. And he said, imagine if I can help make Everton great again. Well, if you were wanting to play in the Premier League, what bigger incentive do you have than that to go and try and help turn this club around? So yes, I think I can understand people maybe saying there is an issue with it, but I think Evertonians are it's not like Evertonians are kicking off every season. You know, certainly saw it last season, how the fan base make an amazing, 12th man at Goodison. I do think without the fans' help, I don't think Everton would have stayed up last season. I think it was as simple as that. And yeah, I think the fan base would welcome any players as well. So I think players would follow it enough to know. I would like to think they follow it enough to know it's not aimed at players in particular.
Yeah, that's right. And just quickly before we move on to other things, this Arsenal game coming up on the weekend, obviously against league leaders and my childhood hero and Mikel Arteta is their manager, who wouldn't have mind taking the Everton job way back when. But as you mentioned, all these factors going into the game, and it is a huge ask. But do you think that could be a catalyst in Everton's season if they were to get a result?
I just have a sneaky suspicion there could be, a point. I think Sean Dyche would be happy with a point out of that to get started, get a point on the board. And I just keep thinking back to the Man City game on New Year's Eve. And I just think of all those fixtures Frank had after the World Cup break. That was the one that everyone wrote off. And he got something out of it. And the performance was brilliant. And I just wonder if the players will rise to the occasion of taking on the league leaders. They're going to have the crowd behind them. There's the new manager to impress. They're going to fight for their place in the team. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little bit daft and I get carried away with football and I love an underdog story. So maybe I'm going to say they might get something out. And then obviously the Merseyside derby, I don't know. I think maybe fans would be happy with 2 points out of that. And then I think it's Leeds next, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tough run.
Yeah, it's a tough run. And, he's certainly been thrown in the deep end, but it's not going to phase the manager whatsoever, is it? I think he's quite cool with that. He'll be totally fine. But it'll be nice to see him barking the orders, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it'd be nice to put the Everton chat behind us now, to be honest with you. I think when you
could go on for days. The problem is with Everton, every day there's a new story at the moment.
Yeah. I tell you what, Amazon missed the trick with not doing an all or not. But I mean, like when you submerge yourself in things like the Twitter spaces and you hear fans' stories of how long they've supported the club and, the comparisons. I heard someone last night talking about how their dad was about to experience when they last went down 60, 70 years ago and how they bounced straight back up from that. But again, it's just a multitude of factors. I think one of them being that Everton have more top flight games than anyone, including Arsenal, and the majority of us have not seen Everton go down. So the prospect of it is just
the counter, isn't there? Before every game at Goodison, there's the counter that goes round, and I thought, God, wouldn't it be sad if that counter went?
Exactly. But anyway, moving on. Something that I was really keen on asking you about is women's involvement in sport. Following England women's success at the Euros last summer, to me, it seemed almost like an inflection point for girls wanting to be involved in sports and a real drive for equal access to opportunity. An example that springs to mind is, and something that I really liked, is almost instantly after them winning the Euros, that there was a public letter that was signed by the entire squad to the government asking for all girls to have access to play football in schools. And obviously, you, as you mentioned, being involved in the industry for 20 years, have you seen that change in attitude or in governance of women's sports in wanting to be more involved almost?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lot older than you. So when I was at school, football wasn't there for girls to play or anything like that. You weren't involved in it. It was sort of girls' sports and boys' sports. I think what the Lionesses were brilliant at is they knew the platform they had at that point they may never have again, and they used it so well. They are so savvy, many of those players. They're just fantastic role models for both girls and boys out there. I was a bit concerned with COVID because I kind of felt that women's football was getting a bit more traction, and I feel people were going to watch it as well, which I think was important. And then obviously no crowds really impacted the women's game. It was annoying if you were into Premier League football, but at least it was on the telly. They came up with a solution for it. It was difficult for the women's game, certainly. So I think the Lionesses win was a brilliant way of swinging it back the other way. I think it's a lot better. I don't know, because I've got a son, so I haven't got a daughter, so I can't talk about little ones now, but I do see when I take him to his football, I do see there's full girls teams now, which there never was. Usually there was one girl on a boys team, and it's not ideal, as you get older, and it's not what anyone wants to see. But now there's sort of 2 or 3 girls teams having their training sessions at the same time. I certainly think it's, and I was going to say, it's certainly okay for girls to be involved in football. And so it should be. So I don't mean that as in you're all right to go do it. It should be okay. It shouldn't be a thing. I think media-wise, we're seeing a lot more female pundits. And I think, like you said, after, the Lionesses win, we've seen huge numbers now of women being pundits on the men's game, men being pundits on the women's game. And I love that. It should just be a game of football.
Yeah.
What I worry about is we've seen it with Karen Carney. I know Alex Scott has had it. They're the two high-profile ones. But all the way down, there won't be a single one of them that hasn't had abuse sent to them online. And that's probably what concerns me most, because I just think if you've got young girls that are looking to get involved, I was speaking to a young girl this weekend who's been doing stuff herself, and she's doing sort of blogs and, in her own time trying to, if she's finishing school, she wants to get involved in media. And she's unfortunately already taken abuse, and she's 16. And I just thought, goodness me, like that. I don't understand. I don't like Love Island. I've never really seen it. I'll be honest. I don't like the premise of it, because, I was fairly quiet at school. I was a bit geeky. So, clearly I would not fit in Love Island. So I find all that terrifying, and it's a bit of a popularity competition. Not interested. I just don't watch it. I don't go sending abuse. I don't watch it. I don't put it on. And for me, it's the same thing. If you don't like a pundit, male or female, either don't listen, turn over, but don't send abuse. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've pushed it in the direction of sports media, almost, because you mentioned the likes of Karen Carney and Alex Scott there. One of the things from a representation perspective that I absolutely loved in the World Cup, the Men's World Cup just gone in Qatar, was that ITV, for the first time ever, had an all-female panel on a men's game. I think it was Seema Jeswell. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly or incorrectly. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Karen Carney and Eni Aluko. I've worked with Eni Aluko and Karen Carney in the past, and they're absolutely fantastic. And I'm absolutely delighted for them to get that opportunity. And do you think? I guess, as you pointed out there, women are a lot more so than men face different challenges. It's not to say that men don't face challenges, but the size of the task almost, and the challenges that are in front of women seem just a hell of a lot more difficult in terms of, as I mentioned before, the access to the opportunities. From your experience, if you don't mind, what has it been like for you? And like you give that example there, especially in the age of digital and social media, do you think that, well, it can only amplify it now, couldn't it?
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, I'm a bit unusual, I guess. I only joined social media a year ago because I just didn't like the idea of people who didn't like me being able to contact me, because I'm very much that if I wouldn't let somebody in my home, then why should I feel like it's letting them into my life. So my Twitter is for work. It's, there's nothing. I think there might be one picture of my dog on there, but apart from that, there's nothing about my life on it. I use it more as a work tool, and it's been really nice, and I've met a lot of really good people on it. It's a great way to connect with guests for shows, but I am aware, and I am somebody that will stew on it a little bit if I get messages, and I have had them, either direct messages or just on things. Yeah, so it is what it, you've got to get tough. But I do think women, and as you say, yeah, men get it as well. Gary Neville, right at the top of the tree, will get tons of abuse. I'm absolutely certain of it, and I've seen it. I think with women, what happens is, though, it is it's just literally about, they're a woman, they're not interested in what they're saying, they're not interested in sort of their background, why they're there, and you immediately get abuse for that. And you wouldn't get a man getting abuse for being a man during their game.
Doesn't make sense.
No, so that's essentially the difference. So yeah, while I'm aware that everybody's getting grief online now, and unfortunately that's the pitfall of it, and we need to work better to stop it, that is an issue with. I mean, I did something similar to this, and I spoke about sort of how when I started out, and even now, I'm just thinking to today, yes, I was the only female in the press room. And quite often I'll go to a press conference and be the only woman there, which is fine. I'm quite used to it now. But it can be quite intimidating. I remember being sort of, 24, going into a press conference and nobody speaking to me, and me thinking, oh my goodness me, and it just was terrifying. It's terrifying doing a press conference anyway. Let me tell you, it might look to everyone like anyone could go in there and do it, but everybody's equally sweating, everybody's panicking, because especially now they're on YouTube. They were on YouTube when I started, thank goodness. So yeah, I think there's issues there that women can feel, being the only one for a start, you do stick out, immediately the attention's on you because you're the only woman in the room, if that makes sense. You're the only female voice when people are listening to the questions being asked. So automatically, if you're not really concentrating on a press conference and you're daydreaming or whatever, you'll zone back in and go, oh, there was a girl asking Jurgen Klopp a question. So there is that. And when I spoke about it last time doing something a little bit like this, I then got grief online telling me I was totally incorrect. And of course, there must be another woman there. It's like, well, I can assure you there's not. But, even that, I got abuse for telling my story.
What do you think because I've got this theory. It's obviously, I think it's conflict based in that, as long as the human beings on the earth, you know, there's always a crank somewhere, isn't there? So someone's always going to take issue with something in the world, no matter what that is. But on the particular issue of, be it sexism, racism, classism, anything in that respect, do you think the antidote almost comes from just an education perspective, or a lack of?
Do you know what? I don't know if I've ever thought about it that deep. I think I genuinely feel that online, people will send things that they would never. I honestly think 99% of people would never say it in real life. I don't think anyone. I can't ever, off the top of my head now, think anyone's ever come up to me to my face and said something like I've had online. They might have thought it, but if they kept it to themselves, that's fine. I would say if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But yeah, I don't know. I think being online, it gives you a sense of that it's safe for you to say anything you want and no one can find you. So I think I would like to see that tightened up. It's way beyond my remit and intelligence to work out how on earth they can stop that. Whoever can, I hope they come up with it fast. But yeah, I think it just comes from a place of, I don't know, maybe people are jealous. Maybe people think it's easy what you do. And it's easy to think everybody else's job's easy, isn't it? You can all sit there and go, well, I bet they have it all right. But everybody has stresses in their job, no matter what you're doing. So yeah, I think unfortunately media, especially sport media now, has got to the point where everybody thinks they could do it.
It's not easy.
It's not.
It's not easy.
I wish it were. I wish it were easy. It's not easy. And, sometimes managers won't be in the mood for it. And I get it. They have loads of commitments now because of, rights deals, and they have to, Jurgen Klopp, I think, last season, I think he was doing sort of 3 press conferences a week because Liverpool was still in 4 competitions, and it was ridiculous. And what can you say? You can't ask that many questions, and you're seeing somebody 3 times a week, and he was bored with it. Everyone else was bored with it. And sometimes he gets a bit tetchy, which I can understand because he's probably thinking, I've got training to do, I've got this to do. But then people watching that think, well, instantly he hates such and such a journalist, and then you get grief for that. And yeah, I'd like some fans to have a go. I think anyone who thinks it's easy, maybe we should set it up.
On that note, what I'm trying to sort of piece it together so it makes sense. Obviously, we've touched on the rise of social and digital media and how that's almost an echo chamber, and sort of people hide behind anonymity to sort of project opinions, as you say, that they would never in a million years say to anybody's face, which it obviously sort of prompts this negative feedback loop. I think obviously if you're somebody, as you say, that does pay attention to that. I've sort of fell out of love with social media rapidly for all those reasons, and I think you had the right idea staying off it for so long. To look at the other side of that coin, you're saying, you know, for example, if you're the only girl in a press conference or only woman in a press conference, and now sort of with social media and you know most people are on there for people to see. Do you get messages from women and girls aspiring to be in the sports media from in it like a positive light to say like I love what you do. What can I do to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the best thing. And I love that at the minute. And I've got quite a few young girls actually that ask me for advice. If I know they're going to a game that I'm going to be at, I always make sure I can go and find them before a game and have a chat to them. And I love that. I just feel like it was hard when I started doing it, really hard. And I think I now feel like I should pay it forward. I feel like, you know, I need to make it. I saw the women's footballers, and when they've been retiring, a lot of the Lionesses decided that, you know, after their amazing Euro success, that was kind of the end of the road for them. And they sort of said, we always wanted to leave the game in a better place than we found it. And I thought, that's brilliant. And I'm trying to do that with, you know, sports media. I want to leave it in a better place than where I came into it, because there were there were some women that looked after me, and, you know, but very, very few. So I would like to think that I'm there, and I'm more than happy for any young girl or any woman that's just starting out to get in touch. Well, I'm going to give her a shout out because she's called Lily Reports on Twitter. And she does a lot of women's football reporting, and Lily, you're going to hate me now. I think you're 8, maybe you're 9 now, but she's only little, and she does her own little videos. She goes to Liverpool women's games, and went to an Everton one because she fancied doing a different team and she wanted to go at that. And I got her on my sports show, and she did a Lionesses sort of rundown ahead of the final. And and her mum said to me, thanks for doing that, because I just didn't think there was a place for her in this. And I kept thinking, you know, she wants to do this and I want to encourage her. And I just think, great, you know, do you know what? She might get to 18 and go, doing that. Completely. Do you know what? Some days I would go, do you know what? Run a million miles away from this industry. It's horrendous. But most days I love it. Little Lily. There's Kira Knox that does Everton stuff that's just starting out. She's another one. I'm going to give these girls a shout out because I think they're all brilliant, and they've all got social media. And they're all sort of doing brilliant work getting into it. And they do come and ask me for tips and things, and just support, just to be there, just listen and just sort of say that was really good, you know. But I think that's because quite often they will probably get some grief. So I just think if someone else is saying actually it's really good, stick with it, then fair play.
One of the advantages that I feel like people of my generation and younger do have now is that there are so many different avenues that you can go down in order to be involved in sports media. I think the hardest stage is having an open door to walk through, but once you do, somebody opens the door for you and you sort of get a glimpse of all the roles that you can fulfill. It doesn't matter. Like you can be in front of a camera, you can be behind the camera, it can be radio, it can be print, it can be television. There are so many different things that people can get involved in. And obviously, you know, having worked with you at Radio Merseyside and I've always had aspirations of presenting. From a presenting standpoint, I have a lot of admiration for your skill set. I think you're a bloody brilliant presenter, and I've told you that before.
I'll give you that tenner later.
Well, was it for you? Was it always wanting to be on the radio that was a sort of a primary motivator in your sort of career goals?
Yeah, it genuinely was radio. I fell in love with radio when I was really small, and again, I'm older than you, but other people that are older will remember having a ghetto blaster, and it had tapes, and I used to record and I do my own radio station and do the jingles, do the presenting. And then a lot of it, I loved talking about sport. I didn't really know quite what I was talking about, but I just jabber along as if I was talking about sport. And then when I got a bit older, I realised, again, you're probably too young for this, sort of the CFAX pages that were on the telly. And I realised that I could read them out loud as if I was reading the sport bulletin. So I used to put the CFAX on the TV and try and read, and it used to flick over. So you had to get your timing just right before the page changed. So that's kind of the geeky way, I became obsessed with it. The radio was always on in my house growing up, so I just loved radio, just loved it. And I still do. And I know there's a lot of debate in the media about if radio is finished. And I actually don't think it is. I think sometimes people consume radio and don't even realize they consume. If you get in your car, most people stick the radio on. Or now I think with smart speakers, I've got smart speakers all over the house, and it's been great because I just permanently have the radio going, you know, in every room. So yeah, it was always radio, bizarrely. Probably should have thought about TV because I probably could be earning a lot more money than radio because it's not the best paid. But no, I just love it. I love how fast you can put something out. I think TV, I watch TV and yeah, it's brilliant. You can do stuff on TV and you can see it, and you know, it does a lot of the work for you, and you can get some very pretty shots and all that. But I love the fact radio, you can literally get it on air like that. I love the immediacy of it. You can turn it around really fast. So yeah, it's always been a kind of when I wanted to get into radio, I did work experience. I wrote to lots of different radio stations, and only one wrote back and said I could go in.
Always the way, isn't it?
It is. It was only one that wrote back, Rock FM in Preston. And again, that doesn't exist anymore, does it? So yeah, I went in for a week. They asked me in for the next week, and I didn't really leave for about 6 months. I had a job at night working in a bar to kind of fund me doing that. I just finished uni. And yeah, sort of got in that way, started doing some freelance shifts, and then got a full-time job and never looked back really. But you know, I think putting that effort in and just showing I was willing to do anything. So I kind of went down the news route with a bit of sport thrown in, and that's always what I've been a bit of a mix. But more recently I've just gone, yeah, I was kind of like, it's now or never. I've just got to push to do the sport full time, and that's it. Love news, but love sport a bit more.
It makes sense if that's where your passion is, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're at work a lot of hours. I just love it. I just enjoy, and you know, it's not just talking about football. You know, I got to do a show from Wimbledon last year, which, you know, never in my wildest dreams did I think I would do a live radio show from Wimbledon, and it was brilliant. Yeah, I loved it. Hopefully going to go to Aintree this year again. Did that last year. Yeah, we were out in Paris. I'd always wanted to do a European game. I was
going to say, I was in ops for the Champions League final in Paris, and you guys, like, that seemed incredible.
Oh, it was a chaotic we went for 5 days because it took a couple of days to get everything set. We literally went with lots of wires. We took a suitcase that was full of wires and stuff to get us on air, but didn't quite know how we were going to get on air. So the amazing team that managed to get us on air. Yeah, we did 3 shows. My sports show came live it was a Liverpool fans bar in Paris, and it was the night before the Champions League final. Absolute chaos. It was like TFI Friday, just on acid. It was just insane. There was just people everywhere. There was flares going off. There was singing. But that's kind of the vibe I wanted for it. I said, if we're going to go do this, I want it to be just rowdy and fun and sporty. And yeah, and it was everything that I could have wanted. And then, yeah, the day of the final, we actually didn't have accreditation to go in because it's so difficult. So we did a live show for 4 hours, literally right outside the gates. We were outside gates C and D, if anyone went over there. And so while it was brilliant in the afternoon, unfortunately, we were then caught up in all the chaos afterwards. But it did mean, you know, straight away you go in work mode and yeah, straight out there. And luckily for us, we could see exactly what was going on. So when texts were coming through, sort of say, you know, such and such has been said in the stadium, we were quick on air to say that's not the case outside here. You know, and I firmly believe that if Liverpool fans hadn't been as patient as they were, and they were being so patient and looking after each other, you know, it could have been a lot worse. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we came home tear gassed and whatever else. It was an experience. Definitely. I didn't think when I was going to end up covering that. We certainly covered a lot, light and shade. Yeah, so it was an experience I won't forget, and it was work-wise, and it was an experience and a half, like to cover you know, going, the team arriving, the fans arriving, and then unfortunately what happened as a work story, it was an incredible moment for us to be involved in it. I'm just really pleased we were able to be telling the truth as well. And that's really important to me. You know, particularly, I'm a sports fan. I would never want to sort of say anything about sports fans when I know they were all in the right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really important for me.
I can attest to that, that BBC Radio Merseyside's coverage of that final, everything that happened before, during, and after the game was spot on. So to be on the ground in Paris, as you say, obviously it disgraceful what happened from a governing body standpoint, UEFA and whatnot, should never have happened in a million years. But as you say, as an event to work, it must have just been unbelievable.
Oh, it was just, yeah, I don't know. The following week, I was at home and I don't know, I felt like on a bit of a come down from everything, because I just thought it was we were on it for 5 days, you know, constantly going. I think we only have 3 hours sleep every night because we were getting up to do breakfast shows and then going right through. And it was a lot of work. But I'm not asking for any sympathy, because I would do it all over again without hesitation. But yeah, the severity that it ended up in, you know, and just to talk to some of the fans as they were coming out, and you actually sort of, while you go into work mode, a lot of the times I was just forgetting that was actually supposed to be also reporting the story. I just wanted to check some people were okay. Some people were really distressed. So yeah, I kind of, yeah, you just wanted to make sure everyone was okay, really. It was a dreadful scene, and people very, very distressed. So yeah, it was not what we anticipated, but I hope we did a good job.
Yeah, no, definitely you did. And as you say, I can agree to that as well. I think once there was a sort of clearer picture of what was going on, I think that was the fair thing that everybody sort of jumped to. Like, I was texting people who I knew that were there, like, "Are you all right?" You know what I mean? Like, make sure
Yeah.
you just keep yourself safe and things like that. But as you say, must have, from like a journalistic standpoint, like a crazy event to cover. As far as that, you know, you're talking about before, the ability to sort of present, and you mentioned you should have got involved in television. I, for one, think you would be bossing television, you know, because you, it's like you've got a fantastic voice, you present yourself really well, and sort of the conviction and the enthusiasm that you portray when when you present this show is something that is really inspiring for someone like me who's just sort of weighing up their options going forward. I had a conversation with Guillaume Balaguer about this when I had him on the podcast, and he gave me a really interesting take on it. In that, I I can be honest about it. I'm some people don't think I am, but I am an introvert. I'm very sort of like, sometimes if I'm with people that I'm not having an engaging conversation with, or if I'm in a situation that I don't necessarily want to be in with people, it drains me and I kind of get tired and a bit quiet. But if I'm speaking to people about things that I'm interested in, or in an environment that I want to be involved in, I'm dead energetic, and I won't shut up. Basically, what Guillaume Balaguer said to me is that he has, it's not so much an alter ego, but he said he just has a different personality. He said he is an introvert as well, and he has a different personality, that when he has to present, he almost slips into that personality. I just wondered, from you very much seem like an extrovert to me. So I was just wondering, from a sort of technical standpoint, the skill set, is that presenting just something that just comes easy to you, like a second nature?
Firstly, I love Guillaume, and he's helped me out a lot in my career and done things for me. So he's a top fella, and
He is boss, isn't he?
yeah. But do you know what? I think every single person that you see on TV or presenting or doing whatever they're doing, it doesn't mean they're confident. I wouldn't describe myself as a confident person. Again, if I went into a room full of people and it was nothing work-wise and it was just sort of, you know, a social thing, I certainly wouldn't be the first one shouting or anything like that. I would be, yeah, I'm not always comfortable. And I always say to somebody, laugh when I said this, my favorite sound in the world is my front door shutting, because then I don't have to talk to anyone. I'm a homebod. I'm a bit of a hermit. I love my job, and I'm very, very lucky that I work hard, but it means I get to cover some amazing things and go amazing places. And it probably is kind of my social life, which makes me sound very sad. I'm not massively, it's probably, I think you do have something that clicks on, maybe. People say to me, oh, you're nervous when you're on air. It depends what you do get. You always have that little buzz when you go in live, definitely. Certainly sort of different occasions where you're slightly out your comfort zone, you know, going live from Wimbledon for a start. I was thinking, oh my goodness me, you know, I'm a proper northerner in the middle of SW19, and everyone seemed quite posh, but they were lovely. So yeah, you get the butterflies then. But I'm okay with putting the fader up and the red light coming on. Maybe that's the radio thing because no one can see me. I don't know. I'm not totally sure. But I certainly don't walk into somewhere and if I go and get a haircut, I'm not very good at conversation. Which seems weird. I know it seems weird me saying that. I think once you're on air, you know, you can't fall off air. Yeah. If you put the microphone up, you just got to keep going. And the adrenaline takes you through. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it. Is I realised that quite quickly is that when the sort of red light goes on in terms of being live on air, there's a buzz that is hard to replicate in any other job.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do find the sort of, if you're doing something, if you're at a game live, you know, you're presenting, I don't know, like presenting a Merseyside derby from either Goodison or Anfield. It's amazing. And, you know, you've got the crowd there as well, and you're live presenting beforehand, and then the game's about to kick off. And, I mean, you know what the atmosphere is like. It's brilliant. And you do sort of come home and it takes you a good few hours to just come back down to earth, really. Definitely, if that makes sense. You just, you know, you're kind of in this adrenaline rush. And, yeah, you've been staying on air for sort of 4 hours straight, you know, without stopping, and you come home and it's like, oh,
crash.
Back home, get the shopping away and feed the dog.
No, I know what you mean. Another thing that I've picked up on, certainly in terms of values that I can see in you, and I think it is valuable to being involved in the industry as a whole, is having a rock solid work ethic. Like, I'm accused by a couple of my mates and people that are close to me that me standards are too high and I work myself too hard at times. But I feel like, for example, if you want to work for somebody like the BBC, you know that the standards of the BBC are extremely high and they have an expectation to perform at that level. So I think having those expectations of yourself to not fall short of those standards can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, don't let anyone talk you out your work ethic whatsoever. I always think, I do know that if people are asked to describe me, I think the first thing they always say is hardworking. But that's just my personality. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I might not be the best, but I will do it to the best. Bathroom. If I'm going to clean my bathroom, I'm going to do it right. It gets properly deep cleaned. If I haven't got time for a deep clean, it has to be postponed till I can deep clean it. That's just who I am. I mean, I came through commercial radio, which is, notoriously, it's very different. It's commercial radio now, but obviously when I was in it, was a lot of local stations. Yeah, you worked a lot of hours for very little pay, and it was very much down to if the ones left surviving and doing it were the ones that just genuinely loved it. It wasn't for the faint-hearted. And same now, do you know what? Even now, I am nowhere, near doing what I want to do. I don't think I've made it at all. I still practice. I still think about things. I still make notes. I'm always looking to improve things. I was asked for advice of people. I'm probably my worst critic, in all honesty. But I don't think that's always a bad thing.
No, not at all. I don't think it is. I think there's many benefits to being your own biggest critic. As I say, in the long run, I feel like it can only benefit you. Have I seen you presenting the fan zone at Goodison before the game?
Yes, that's me.
just the variety of what you do as well is something that I think is closely linked to the work ethic. Does I used to, I mean, I guess obviously I'm, I'm gleaming from what you say. It is it important to you to be outside of your comfort zone and doing different things?
Yeah, and I think because I'm desperate to sort of have this career in sport, and I'm well aware that, you know, I came from a point where it was really tough. You know, it was really tough, and I'm glad things are getting easier for women in sport. Yeah, I will. If someone offers me an opportunity, I'll usually say yes. Sometimes I say yes, and then I think I actually don't really know how to do this, but we'll work it out. Yeah, and if that means I have to watch other people, I have to ask people, I have to read up on things. Yeah, I do stadium announcing for women's games, so do a bit of that, which I've never done before. I've done some Premier League games, stadium announcing, which is bizarre, by the way. If ever anyone gets the go, everything is if it's a TV game, it's timed to the second. So you have to say everything. Those team sheets are read out to the second because you've got to go with TV. And yeah, that's terrifying because it's sort of, yeah, say it's a 4 o'clock kickoff, it might be, you know, 5 to 4 and 7 seconds. You know? So yeah, but definitely, I think I'm the sort of person that if I get a chance to do something, especially in sport, I'll give it a go. I don't know if that's a good thing. Just thinking, I don't know. And I like to fly by the seat of my pants, definitely.
I think it's an important thing to do, just to just as you say, it keeps yourself on your toes, and I think it comes back to that sort of being your own biggest critic. Almost, it's like pushing yourself to find out what the limits of your abilities are, almost, which I think is an important thing to do, particularly if you're career driven. Which
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, see, now I'm thinking about it. I like when you're asking about confidence and sort of not on air. Yeah, I will take opportunities and I will put myself out in front of people to try and be better at my job and, you know, sort of make my career path go in the direction, you know, I want it to go in. But probably away from work, yeah, I can be quite boring. I probably won't. Yeah, sometimes I'll sort of, people will say, "Oh, do you want to go meet for lunch?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I can't. I just want to stay at home." So actually, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll say yes for work. Quite often I'll just stay at home then.
oh, you're speaking to me soul there, honestly.
I'm really dull, really dull.
Same, same. Just from one of the biggest motivations for me is stories. I mean, I guess if anybody's listened to me podcast before, I apologize because I have told this story, and that the one of the biggest things that inspired me down this sort of career path that I'm on was that when my granddad used to play for Everton, didn't make a first team appearance, but he went on about it as if he did. But so he was at the club, played for them, B team reserves and all that, and all I know he didn't make a first team appearance, but that gave him enough stories and experiences to talk about for a lifetime. So when I was a kid, like when I was younger, we'd sit down and we'd record podcasts before podcasts were a thing, if you know what I mean. Like he'd tell me these stories, and
Yeah.
it really sort of fueled my ambition to want to work within the industry. Hence the podcast, hence wanting to find out and listen to people's stories. As far as people that you've spoke to and the interviews that you've hosted, who has been the most insightful and interesting person that you've spoke to?
Oh, crikey. Oh, this is where my memory gets me now because my memory's atrocious. And again, probably that work ethic thing that once it's done, I check it's been okay and then I just move on to the next thing. So I think sometimes I should be a little bit more sort of look back and think, yeah, you've done. Let me think. Let me think. I mean, I did do a one-to-one with Jurgen Klopp, and to get that, particularly when you're local radio, that is an unusual thing. And you know what? He was a fascinating person, and I tried to do it very much about him as a person. I like sports psychology. I'm obsessed with who these people are. Maybe a little bit more than if it's a 4-4-2 or going 5 at the back or whatever. Sometimes I'm interested to find out what makes them tick, because they're quite often different to us. So yeah, Jurgen Klopp was really interesting. He spoke about how he almost became a doctor, and was telling me that. And I said it was sort of COVID was still around, and I said, oh, but you would probably have had to deal with COVID. Sort of laughing, and he laughed, and then he went, actually, and then he went on this very long answer about how he actually would have relished that, because what he likes is to take a problem and find how he can get a solution for it. And I thought that is so telling of who he is. And we were talking about COVID and, you know, what he nearly was instead of a football manager. And I thought that's a real insight into how he works, that actually would have relished the chance to be a doctor working in the pandemic, because he felt he could have, with enough work, come up with some kind of solution. So I love that. Yeah, I love talking to him. Oh gosh, who else have I spoken to? This is where you're making me think. Someone I do like speaking to, I've spoken to a lot in my career, Seamus Coleman, because he's just a complete footballer who is doesn't seem like a footballer.
So he's so grounded. Like I did when I was in high school, I did my work experience at Finch Farm. Every single morning without fail, he'd come in, shake my hand, ask me how I was. Those little things where you can tell he's almost been raised right, if you know what I mean. Like,
yeah. And you know what? There's a lot of them that are like that, but he's certainly someone for me that when you speak to him, I don't feel he's hiding anything. He's very honest. We'll talk about who he is. He says his life's football and family, and that's it. And I believe him. You know, I think, again, when you talk about work, I think he's someone with that. Do you know someone who, we mentioned him earlier, actually, and he was one of my first sport interviews. I worked for a station called Tower FM in Bolton, and it was Sam Allardyce when he was the Bolton manager. I was terrified, absolutely terrified, because I thought, it's the first time I've done a one-to-one, and I was really scared about it. And I thought, he's such a, you know, like a big man, a booming voice. And I thought, I'm going to go in there, and I'm only 5'1". So, you know, didn't really know what I was doing, in all honesty. And he was lovely. He was really good. He took it all in good part. There was some sort of light and shade in the interview. So yeah, that was, yeah. I like talking to legends of the game as well. Any of the legends. I'm trying to think of another sport. Do you know somebody who was on my sports show and she hasn't been well recently is Jenny Gow. And she's obviously BBC pit lane reporter doing Formula One. She's someone I've admired for a long time, listening to her, because I love Formula One. I think if I could, I'd love to do Formula One, you know, what she does on, but she's, you know, just brilliant at what she does. Very much fly by the seat of your pants, like we were saying, that kind of fly by the seat of your pants. You're on air, you're on a grid, you've got to talk to these drivers before they get in the car. And I sent her a message online, not thinking it would ever, and she got back to me and said she'd come on the sports show to talk about, it was head of the British Grand Prix last year. And I know she's not been well recently. So I hope she gets back into doing, you know, the grid walks again and gets back to work soon. But she's someone maybe that's not exactly as in an athlete, but she's somebody involved in sport media who, yeah, gave me a time and did a really good interview and was fascinating. Yeah, it was really cool. So I liked her.
On that, you talk about, like, you've got a keen interest in F1 and tennis. One of the things I'm finding, it's a challenge. I'm not going to say I'm struggling with it, because I understand you just sort of dedicate research and time to it, is that transitioning to covering another sport. And again, like we talked about earlier, because you hold such high standards of yourself, you don't, just out of respect for that sport that you're not well versed in, you don't want to disrespect that sport by covering it poorly, if you know what I mean. How do you find that transition in between different sports?
I mean, this is why when people say to me, did you watch Happy Valley? And I say, no, I don't watch a lot of TV. It's because I watch a lot of sport or sport documentaries. Don't watch any soaps. Yeah, so it's probably, yeah, if I'm watching something that's not live sport, it tends to be, I love the Netflix series following F1. I haven't started the tennis one yet because I know that's gone on. Looking forward to that. Like all the sport documentaries. Yeah, it's hard, and I don't know. There are some people I think that maybe are masters of a lot of trades. I'm not one. Yeah, probably cricket's not my forte, I'll be honest. And I would be super scared if I had to do it, because yeah, you want them if people are giving up their time to talk to you, I don't want to offend them by coming across a bit clueless. So yeah, it's probably cricket would scare me.
I thought that was an interest. So it's almost turning sport as a whole and different sports into your form of entertainment. Like,
yeah, I told you I was boring.
oh no, I don't think that's boring. I find that fascinating, and I think it's something that you probably have to train your mind to do. Like I'm a huge film fan. Like I love film, so my ability to to watch sports films is something that I can do sort of out of my appreciation for film.
Yeah, love sport films.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But then I also love Star Wars and the Avengers, so they're nothing to do with sport.
No, like I spoke to Gabriel Clark recently, who is a fantastic example of someone who has got that crossover of sport and film, like
Yeah.
down to a T. Like the documentaries that he is in charge of are
Yeah.
sensational.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I do find that, yeah, I don't know a lot of my friends sort of not in the industry when they talk about things they've watched. I haven't got a clue what it is because I am watching a lot of sport. But yeah, there are some sports that I haven't. I like watching a bit of darts. I don't know if I'd be comfortable enough to cover it. But I think when you start covering it as well, if you already like it and you become a lot more immersed in it, and you know, I'll be honest, I've always liked women's football. Probably didn't watch enough of it, but now I love watching it. And yeah, the more you get into things, it's easier to sort of, you know, refer to things in interviews, or you know, sort of stuff that's gone on. And similar with, you know, Premier League football or lower league football. Yeah, like I love the tennis, always loved the tennis. So yeah, but it was something I actually never thought I would be able to do on air.
would you say a learning thing as well? Is that like every sort of every bit of exposure or coverage that you do, no matter what situation that you put in, for better or for worse, you're always sort of learning from that experience. So you just take what you've learned and bring it forward into your next sort of job or whatever.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I mean, when I was at Radio City, I, you know, was desperate to get into sport and completely understood I couldn't be put in doing Liverpool and Everton to start. So I was started with Chester. Roberto Martinez was playing for Chester actually when I was covering them. And then I moved on to Tranmere, and they were in League One at the time. Brian Little was the manager. And so yeah, I'd go home and away doing sort of live inserts from games. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I did it, I remember thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But I didn't say that to anyone because I thought they were not going to let me go. So all I did was just for about a week beforehand, just watched lots of people doing live inserts from games, you know, how they did it, you know, did they give a lot of description? How, you know, how did they talk about a player? And just thought, right, and just sort of copied off people.
Yeah.
And copied other people. And then eventually, you know, I got to the point where I was like completely comfortable doing it. And it was, yeah, you still have the nerves and you have to pay attention for a whole 90 minutes and not, you know, because you don't know when they're going to, all you're hearing is, especially if there was a Liverpool game, for example, on the commentary, I wouldn't get a lot of notice knowing they were coming to me. So I had to be listening. Yeah, so it probably is just sometimes you throw yourself in at the deep end and see if you swim.
Yeah, no, I can certainly recall a couple of experiences where it's been like that for me. But Julia, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and it's about time for the dog's walk, so I'm going to wrap it up with one last question. Touching on that theme of women's involvement in sports, and you know, especially within our field of sports media, if there's anything, a message or advice that you could relay to, like, you know, a young girl or a woman wanting to get into the sports media space, what would that message be, and what would you recommend them to do?
I would say watch and listen to all the sport that you're interested in. Don't force it upon yourself. So, you know, if you're not into rugby, that might not be for you, but there's plenty of sports out there, from, you know, netball's doing amazing things on the TV now, which I never thought, you know, when netball was played at my school, I never thought we would see it, you know, on Sky. Yeah, so make sure you enjoy it for a start. It shouldn't be something you hate. So enjoy it, find people you like and have some role models, and they don't all have to be female. You might like some of how the, you know, male presenters present, and just give it a go. Give it a go. None of us know what we're doing to start with. None of us have a clue. And remember that every single person, I remember Gary Lineker starting on Match of the Day, and he'd never presented in his life. And now he's very comfortable in front of a camera. Yeah, if you go on YouTube and have a look at his first Match of the Day, you will see it's very different. So nobody has the foggiest what they're doing. But put yourself in there and don't be scared to ask people for help. I wish I'd done that. I think I felt I couldn't say, I'm a bit nervous about this. What would you do? And what do you think I should do? So find someone you're comfortable, whether you send them a message, whether you know them or not. They might get back to you like I had with Jenny Gow, and she gave me some really good tips off air about my job. Yeah, just ask questions, but believe in yourself. Throw yourself in. As I said before, you'll have to swim and you'll be fine.
Giulia, I've thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation, and it'd be great to do another one in the future. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. As you can see, I'll talk forever because I'm in my own home. I've shut that door. Don't have to go out.
The sound of the world is the sound of your front door shutting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.